10 years ago, the story of Destiny started with the Traveler, a godlike entity the size of a small moon, hovering over Earth and dispensing superpowers to humans to use against encroaching alien hordes. In the final shape, Destiny 2's next expansion, we're finally primed to find out what's inside that massive robotic orb. It's apparently pretty weird in there. We've gotten a few brief glimpses into the pale heart of the Traveler, the new location where the final showdown between the heroes of humanity and the Witness, Destiny 2's primary antagonist, will take place. In a recent hands-off preview event, however, Bungie gave something of an extended look into the Pale Heart, a pocket of the universe where memories and emotions combine with the Traveler's near-magical paracausal power to redefine reality. The Pale Heart is a place that, according to Bungie, draws on the experiences of whoever's inside it to create the world they see around them. In the early missions of the Final Shapes campaign, you'll see nostalgic elements from the last 10 years of Destiny folded into the landscape, things like giant ghost shells and overgrown segments of old locations, levels, and social spaces. But the Traveler's power, the light, is clashing with the darkness power wielded by the Witness, and that's also causing the landscape to twist and contort, especially as you delve deeper. It's like a world in the process of being defragmented, Bungie said. While the preview didn't give an extensive overview of the expansion, it did provide some impressions of what players can expect, showing off portions of the first mission of its campaign and a later strike that's also a part of the story. Bungie previously detailed the different threats that make up the Witness's new army, the Dread, but you'll start by running into Weavers, small enemies that use the Strand ability introduced in the Lightfall expansion to nab you with ethereal ropes. Weavers can grab and yank you toward them and out of cover, exposing you to attack, or sometimes just tossing you off a cliff. Bungie said it has reworked the campaign and particularly its legendary difficulty with an eye toward making sure it feels challenging but fair, whether you're running it alone or with a fire team. There's also a greater emphasis on adding raid and dungeon-like mechanics to more missions, and in the preview, we saw elements like the Light and Darkness seeds that appear in Lightfall's Root of Nightmares raid. These don't work quite the same as in that raid, and you'll be able to use all these mechanics as a solo player, but in both the campaign mission and the strike shown during the presentation, there were additional mechanics that should make progression through the Pale Heart a little more complex than just shooting a lot of monsters. These include the Bats with Guns, the Grim, which sport a stunning shriek ability that can be particularly dangerous if it nails you while you're trying something harrowing like jumping over a gap. The Grim are also the first flying enemies in Destiny 2 that have wings, which means they bob up and down as you fight them, adding a slightly different wrinkle to combat. Even farther in, players run into a Harbinger, a new dread enemy that occupies the same place as the Tormentor in terms of danger presented to opponents. Where Tormentors feel like smaller versions of the Root of Nightmares boss Nezarec, Harbingers are more similar to Rulk, the boss of the Vow of the Disciple raid. The Harbinger also wields Strand abilities, turning some players' powers back against them. The Harbinger can suspend you with Strand the exact same way opponents can in player versus player battles, locking you in place and opening you up to serious damage. Harbingers generally are less mobile than Tormentors, but rely on ranged fighting rather than melee attacks. The landscape of the Pale Heart is reacting to the presence of the Guardians, filling the world with elements from their memories and experiences. But the Witness is also having the same effect, and things will get more corrupted and darker as you draw closer to it. After the first mission, Bungie showed off a new strike that takes place about halfway through the campaign. Here, we ventured deeper into the Pale Heart in pursuit of the Witness, and the landscape has changed drastically, becoming more rocky, desolate, and barren. This one is themed after Destiny's Wish Dragons, the Ahamkara, with players facing a huge Tormentor boss known as the Tormentor of the Ahamkara. The strike includes dread enemies and Taken, while also introducing another foe players will face, the Lucent Brood, the hive under the control of Savathun, the Witch Queen. Savathun and her forces are also trying to oppose the Witness, but that doesn't necessarily mean they're on your side. In the strike, you'll fight Lucent Hive on a few different occasions. Like the campaign, the strike also works in new mechanics that are a little more comparable to dungeons or raids than we've seen in previous strikes. You chase the Tormentor through the strike, working through gaping caves and barren valleys. As you fight the strike's major battles against enemies like Harbingers, you'll find weird darkness goo flooding into the area, as well as major opponents with unbreakable shields. To clear them, you'll need to seek out nearby Ahamkara skulls. Finding an item called Taken Essence allows you to empower these skulls, breaking the shields. It's getting the Taken Essence, however, that's the tough part. Usually you'll venture into a side room in search of what you need to empower the Ahamkara skulls. In the sections we saw, the rooms are full of walls and platforms, and when you grab the Taken Essence at the far end, you have to run back as darkness sludge fills in around you. In one room, the walls close in toward you like a trap in an Indiana Jones movie, forcing you to leap over and duck under obstacles as you hustle out. In another, the sludge fills the room from the floor up, so you need to climb up platforms to avoid it on your way out. In a later area, you leap through a hole in the wall to find yourself in an environment similar to the inside of Riven, the Ahamkara that serves as the final boss of the Last Wish raid, further solidifying the strange architecture and the reshaping of reality within the Pale Heart. In another section, you'll cross through a hallway filled with giant arms made of stone. The statues serve as platforms and take the shapes of human and hive hands, as well as Ahamkara tentacles. Also among the locations in the strike was a town made of the same architecture we've seen inside the pyramid ships of the Black Fleet, suggesting that this location might have manifested from the Witness's memories. The preview presentation also gave us a pretty extensive look at Prismatic, the new Destiny 2 subclass coming with the final shape. Prismatic is less a totally new subclass than a combination of old elements. It pieces together different parts of existing subclasses like supers, melee, and grenade abilities, and passive buffs, allowing you to access several different kinds of powers, specifically both light and darkness abilities, that you previously couldn't utilize at the same time. The subclass also comes with a new ability called Transcendence, which Bungie describes as being like a mini super. While using the Prismatic subclass, dealing damage with your abilities and weapons charges up 2 meters, one for light and one for darkness. Kinetic weapons increase both meters, but at a lower rate than weapons with specific elemental damage types. When both are full, you can activate Transcendence, which gives you increased damage reduction, speeds the recharging of your abilities, and gives you a new grenade ability that combines light and darkness damage types. As you work through that first mission, you'll start to find places where the light and the darkness have collided to create strange wellsprings of power. Standing in those springs allows you to briefly access Transcendence, much like players could activate Strand briefly at certain points in Lightfall. Transcendence gives you a chance to try out Prismatic in short bursts. However, unlike Strand, you can run back to these wellsprings again and again during a battle if you want, allowing you to regain Transcendence as needed. While you'll be able to use Transcendence during missions by finding its wellsprings, the final shape doesn't just lock Prismatic up behind these environmental activation points. By the end of the first mission, you'll have entered a strange overgrown version of the tower from the original Destiny, and ventured into the room where the Vanguard leaders used to hang out. In that place of power, you'll find a well of energy so powerful it permanently unlocks Prismatic, allowing you to use the subclass for the rest of the campaign. The thing is, while you'll get Prismatic right away, Bungie doesn't want you to feel like you're either forced to use it or forced not to. If you've got another character build you're comfortable with and want to use throughout the Final Shapes campaign, you'll be able to do that. The Wellsprings give you a shorter duration version of Transcendence, so you can try it out and get through fights that require it, but you can still stick with your favorite subclass if you'd prefer. During the preview presentation, Bungie showed off the Hunter take on Prismatic. This one combined elements like the Stasis melee ability Withering Blade, the Void buff Stylish Executioner, the Solar Grenade ability Gunpowder Gamble, and the new Arc super ability Storm's Edge. It also detailed how Bungie has adjusted these abilities to make them work better with Prismatic. For example, in a Void build, Stylish Executioner will turn you invisible when you kill an enemy suffering from a Void-based debuff. With the Prismatic version, any debuff can trigger Stylish Executioner, including the stasis slowing effect enemies get when you hit them with Withering Blade. When you first unlock the new subclass, you'll start with a curated version that combines specific abilities. Bungie went through a lot of iterations to make sure that each class's starting version of Prismatic would be a compelling combination of elements that made the subclass worth playing with, but without making other builds obsolete. However, Prismatic is built on customization. Adding more options requires unlocking aspects and fragments that give you different abilities and benefits like with past subclasses. But where Lightfall had you killing enemies to earn strand meditations in order to unlock different elements of the subclass, a system many players didn't really like, the final shape will award you with aspects and fragments as you work through the story campaign, or from exploring the Pale Heart. There should also be less grind in getting everything you need for effective builds on all three of your characters. While the preview showed off the Prismatic build for Hunters, all three classes will have plenty to work with. The focus on making sure players can gain Prismatic and all its customization elements through the campaign also helps guarantee it'll be available for the Final Shapes raid, which launches just 3 days after the expansion's release. Bungie says you'll be able to fully unlock Prismatic before the raid launches. At the launch of the Final Shape, only certain abilities and elements will be available as part of Prismatic. You won't be able to mix and match every single melee ability or super into a new subclass of your choosing. In addition to keeping Prismatic from replacing all the other, more specific subclasses, Bungie limited the options to make sure the subclass would be balanced, especially in Crucible, Destiny 2's player versus player mode. More abilities might one day get added to the Prismatic subclass, but Bungie wants to see how players handle Prismatic first, and how it impacts the game, before thinking too much about its future. They'll be keeping a close eye on it throughout the Final Shapes launch to see how Prismatic is faring and to keep it balanced. We have a ton more coming out for Destiny in the launch up to the Final Shape expansion, so make sure to stay right here on GameSpot.